Have you watched Edgerunners? I recently finished the series, and while I found it brilliant, absolutely excellent, I won't linger on its details here. Because ultimately, what Edgerunners really did was remind me of Cyberpunk 2077. That's the unique power of video games. They immerse us, often alone, in ways no other form of art can, so much so that when we experience something truly excellent, we remember it as if we had been there ourselves, as if we had truly lived it. Edgerunners brought back so many memories for me. The story, the dialogues, the characters, those seemingly insignificant scenes that somehow carried immense weight. And then there's the city, Night City, and the emptiness that followed once it was over. While I can't wait to dive into all these points, probably after replaying the game, which I'm currently doing, there's one thing I want to focus on now. Because this one thing, I had forgotten about it.
Make her bleed!
Over time, we tend to idealize our memories. There's no doubt that Cyberpunk left a lasting impression on me. But I had almost forgotten that at first, I didn't enjoy it as much as I remember, or rather that, much like the emptiness it leaves you with after its conclusion, I found it empty after its lengthy introduction and in the sessions that followed, and even more than that, I felt empty within it. To give you some context, I bought Cyberpunk at launch even though it was riddled with technical issues and gameplay shortcomings. Oddly enough, that didn't bother me much. I was lucky enough to play through it with relatively few issues. Some loading problems, a couple of crashes, but nothing game-breaking. Even though it was far from what it is today, I already thought it was a good game. But I wasn't having fun. Despite the writing, despite the story, I didn't feel much. Of course, the introduction had made an impression. I'd grown attached in no time to good old Jackie, that dreamy, gruff, ambitious friend who was soft-hearted when it came to his girlfriend, Misty, a giant teddy bear with a heart of gold. But very quickly, this world, this city, took him from me. And then, as if that weren't enough, by implanting Johnny Silverhand, a dead rocker terrorist from 50 years ago, into V's head, the game killed my interest in the story. V was doomed. Still, unable to quite grasp the emptiness I was already feeling, I decided to keep going. I wandered around Night City, completing contracts I stumbled across while half-heartedly looking for a cure for V. But for what? My character, already doomed, had almost nothing to lose. And even before that, he didn't have much to begin with. Sure, V wasn't entirely alone. He had Misty, Victor, and Mama Wells, people who supported him in their way. But at that moment, none of it mattered to me. After a few sessions, I closed the game, thinking I'd come back to it later, which I did. 3 years later. It wasn't until recently that I decided to give Cyberpunk another chance. Honestly, by that point, I'd almost forgotten why I had stopped playing. I kept seeing people praising it, again and again, louder and louder. Updates kept rolling out, improving its technical state. Mechanics were being fleshed out, and then came an expansion, Phantom Liberty, showered with praise. As for the writing, everyone seemed to agree it was sublime, or at least everyone with good taste. So I went back. This time, I chose a different starting path, and once again I experienced that same tragic introduction. Once again, Night City took Jackie from me. The loss still hurt, maybe even more this time, because it repeated itself without meaning. It felt like it only existed to name a cocktail. Ridiculous, and once again I began to wonder. Just like before, I explored the world, paid close attention to the story, and tried to get involved. But strangely, despite how fascinating the setting was, I still couldn't connect. To me, Cyberpunk felt empty, not of activity, but of meaning. I didn't see what I had to offer this city, this story, this game. I didn't see why I should save V, my character, but also, in some ways, myself. It was as if he were empty too, and I was just occupying space in his mind. As if the line between him and me was blurring, but I, as the player, couldn't truly immerse myself in his world. Much like Johnny Silverhand. It's hard to fight when you don't know what you're fighting for. We're social animals. Without others, it's hard to find meaning, and while we might crave solitude, an escape, an adventure, we run from isolation. Isolation kills us. V felt unbearably alone, so much so that he opened his heart to a pre-programmed doll, someone designed only to tell him what he wanted to hear, or rather, what I wanted him to hear. Then came a meeting, one outside Night City, a meeting I won't dwell on, but know this. The encounter between V and this character changed how I saw the game as a whole. It even changed how I felt about the city. That character was PanAm. You see, when we lack a dream, we often end up chasing someone else's. When we don't have a goal of our own, we tend to help others achieve theirs. And while it can be tragic to mistake someone else's dream for your own, knowingly and willingly helping another person can be therapeutic. In our darkest moments, we all need to feel useful. I won't elaborate too much on that meeting or the relationship that followed between PanAm and V. A relationship that blurred the line even further between player and character thanks to the game's masterful writing. What I do know is that it took her for Night City to come alive. Not Judy, not Johnny, not Misty, not Jackie, not Victor, none of them had managed to breathe life into it. But through PanAm, they too became alive and important to me. The emptiness of Night City, the emptiness of Cyberpunk, its lack of meaning, was never about what it contained. It was about the absence of a reason to explore it. This game was missing a purpose that felt compelling to me as a player, a goal that resonated with why I was playing, and I imagine that's true for many players based on what I've read. It's why so many of us during our first playthrough went almost straight through the main story until one encounter changed everything. From that point on, we found ourselves wandering, stalling for time, delaying the game's conclusion. It seems a home isn't just a place, it's where you feel welcomed by your people. Through PanAm, her relationship with V, the Aldecaldos, and even those I hadn't cared much for until then, I finally found meaning in the main objective, saving V's life. He had to live, for them. This time, I did everything that felt important in Cyberpunk. I tried to make the best choices for them. Above all else, I saved who I could, ran to help anyone who called V for assistance. In short, I played for the people who had become V's reason to live. And that's exactly why, in the final act, standing on the rooftop above Misty's shop, when the time came to choose an ally to remove the chip and Silverhand's construct from V's mind, I abandoned everyone. Toward the end of the story, at least in my playthrough, I had the choice between accepting Hanako Arasaka's help or turning to PanAm and the Aldecaldos. Both options were incredibly risky. Everyone involved could die, or worse, and both sides had their reasons for helping me, no matter the cost. Or at least that's how I saw it. Given the risks and the context, here's how I read the situation. The question wasn't who I trusted most to succeed. It was who I was willing to sacrifice. After dozens of hours and several days where Cyberpunk dominated my thoughts, the game asked me if I was ready to sacrifice the very people I had fought for. A family, friends, a lover. And the answer was no. So I chose Hanako Arasaka. To sum it up, the plan was to attack the corporation, find Hanako's brother, Yorinobu, the man who killed their father, and resurrect said father, Saburo Arasaka, by transferring his mind into Yorinobu's body. The mission was a success. Hanako kept her word and V was sent to Arasaka's orbital station for treatment. For a time he underwent tests and surgeries to remove the chip and recover. But during that time, contact with PanAm, Judy, Victor, Misty, Soul, All of them was impossible. Eventually, V was discharged. That was my decision, knowing and accepting that after fighting so hard and losing so much, he only had 6 months left to live. Free of Johnny and the construct in his head, a Johnny I never trusted as a player, not until he left, leaving behind a strange regret. V walked on, whistling, light-hearted, ready to return to Night City and spend his last months there, ready, perhaps, to reunite with some of the people who mattered to him. And I felt empty. More so, if not as much as I had the first time I entered this city. It was as if V had managed to pull me out of his psyche. I no longer had a goal, so I no longer had a reason to exist in that world. I can count on one hand the games that have left me with such a void after finishing them. I arrived in this world with nothing, and I left with even less except for the memory of having lived an extraordinary, albeit tragic, adventure. It's been a year since then, and even now that emptiness lingers. All it takes is a melancholic never fade away to bring it all rushing back. But the mind has a way of romanticizing hardship and painful stories. We even grow nostalgic for the moments that shaped us. And so, I am nostalgic for Cyberpunk, even though it was a near constant tragedy. Luckily, Cyberpunk is a game, and games have something exciting, something a little unfair. You can replay them. You can go back, live the adventure again, and reinvest yourself emotionally. Even better, you can erase your regrets, or at least write an alternate version of the story you've made your own. Because I have regrets in Cyberpunk. I never trusted Johnny. And because of that, I missed out on a unique friendship, a personality I barely tried to understand because I was too busy mistrusting him. Next time, minus a few snarky remarks, I'll listen to him. I didn't help Judy the way she wanted. I didn't follow her plan exactly as she envisioned it, thinking I knew better. But doing what you think is best for someone isn't always what's best for them. Good intentions alone aren't enough. And I understand now. People often prefer to feel supported, even as they charge headfirst into a wall, rather than feel betrayed by being forced to avoid it. Nobody likes being stopped from making an irresistible mistake. And sure, she seemed happy traveling after leaving Night City, but maybe that was just a facade. I didn't ask the Aldecaldos for help, thinking I was protecting the people I considered V's new family. But sometimes, refusing help from those closest to you feels like a betrayal, or at least a betrayal of your bond. It's a betrayal of their loyalty, their willingness to stand by you. It's shutting them out when deep down you know they'd want to be there for you, just like you were there for them, even if it means crashing into that wall together. Because the difference between your people and everyone else isn't about transactions. It's about relationships. Unequal exchanges between loved ones don't matter as long as the connection is clear, the intentions are kind, and the loyalty is unshaken. By refusing to involve the Aldecaldos in a trade I thought I couldn't repay, when, in some sense, maybe I already had, I betrayed their trust. That's a mistake I won't make again. So yes, maybe in that sense, those we're close to are a kind of prison. Maybe Sartre was right. Hell is other people. Or maybe Kenny Ackerman was right. We're all slaves to something. We all need an obsession to keep moving forward. But if that's the case, I ask you this. What's the point of being free? What's the point of having nothing to lose, if it means having nothing at all? Being free doesn't mean being unchained. It means choosing your chains and letting go of them when the time feels right. And so, on this recent return to Night City, I've chosen mine.